Welcome back, Ceramics 1. In this video, we're going to review tidying up the coils on the outside. We're going to go through paddling. If you want to paddle the outside, we'll go through smoothing and burnishing the outside with a rib tool or a fettling knife, and then taking the exposed coils and tidying them up so they look exactly like you want them to. Okay, so getting started. Let's say that your pot is a little uneven like mine. This side is bending out just a little bit more than this side. If your clay is still wet enough, you can take one of the larger rulers and use it as a paddle and kind of gently paddle the edges and get them back into shape. Okay? Now this only works if your clay is wet. It's kind of like before leather hard, and it's still squishy and a little bit movable. Okay? If you've passed the point of leather hard, you can't really paddle anymore, because what you're doing then is you're basically forcing your clay to crack and start breaking. So you can really only do this method of paddling when your clay is still wet. Now my clay is still wet. It's still kind of bendy. It's like just before leather hard. So I'm working with it in the right moisture level. Okay, if you're working with it and it is not wet enough, you can see that it's still leaving a wet ring on my wooden bat there. If it's not wet enough, you're going to ruin it, and then you'll have to start all the way over. So I highly recommend the paddle only if it is wet enough. Okay, so I'm just gonna like tidy up this base in the shaping of it, because the base was a little lopsided, and I'm going to tidy up the sides because they were a little lopsided. And you kind of, if you lean down, and notice that I'm sitting in a chair, and for like lots of the other videos I was standing up. It's good to get kind of a view of your pot from the side so you can see the profile, whereas if you're standing up, it's a little harder to get the profile. So you want to make sure that for each part of the project you're sitting at the right level. Okay? Now I've gotten the shape of this much more even, whereas before it was very organic and kind of lumpy. Okay, so that's a way to kind of reshape it. You can also move the clay if it's still really wet, and you take your paddle and you kind of paddle it from the side. You can actually smooth, I'm going to do it right here on the coils. You can actually smooth those coils out. You'll see right here how those coils are getting compressed together and smooth. So you can do that. But let's say I want to have a few of these coils in the middle here. This, like, let's say this top section that's actually down here. Let's say I want to have those exposed and I want to leave them open. But remember, I did say you have to have on your sculpture some place that you can do tape resist. So make sure that you leave a place that is nice and smooth, even if you want exposed coils. So for the next part, you might want to have a sponge. I've got a wet throwing bucket here with a sponge in it. Please don't use a throwing bucket, use something else. Okay? And if I'm just going to wet this surface just a little bit, teeny tiny bit, I can then take my fettling knife and smooth the coils down. And I'm going to start in the back here because that's where I'm working. And as I turn this pot, you'll see them smoothed. As I'm turning that, you'll see those smooth. And notice that I'm pulling in a downward motion, so I'm actually compressing the coils together. If you pull just sideways, you're just kind of smearing the clay and you're not really compressing it. So this compressing action will actually help the coils stay together better, as well as give you a smooth edge around your coil pot. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of do this as speedily as I can. You can also, if you find one, you can use one of the metal ribs. They work really well, especially if you moisten the metal rib and get some water on it and then pull with it. Now, if you've already got a super wet coil pot that's like earlier than leather, like wetter than leather hard, I wouldn't use too much extra moisture. But if yours is like getting to the leather hard point, I would definitely recommend a little moisture to keep the metal moving across the surface of the clay. All right, so let's say I want this part down here to have my tape resist designs. This smooth area could now accommodate the tape resist designs. Whereas if you try to do the tape resist on the bumpy exposed coils, the tape is not going to stick and you're not going to be able to do that. Okay, so smoothing out the rest of my coils down here. Might look something like that. I'm going to smooth this base off. And notice that I did put my stamp on the bottom right there now. So make sure you put your name on just in case you haven't put it on yet. Remember, I'll mark you down points for that if you don't have your name on it once it goes into the kiln room. Okay. Again, working with a banding wheel is super helpful because you can kind of turn your pot as you go and speed the process up. Okay, I'm going to flip this over now and do that top section. Now, you can use that smoothing technique on as much as you want. Let's say you want to keep your coils exposed, like these coils up here that I wanted exposed. We have lots of like quote-unquote professional modeling tools like this with nice points on them and smooth rounded parts on them. I actually prefer, believe it or not, the popsicle stick because you've got this nice point that's been honed on there, and if it's not nice, you can like ask me and I'll carve it out for you. And you have popsicle sticks that are flat, which you can kind of use to curve the edges. So if I'm going to start curving this edge here, I would take my popsicle stick point, press it in, and kind of define that edge like that. And then like right down here, you can see it's like not quite rounded and nice. I can take my popsicle stick and round that edge out a bit so that it still looks like a coil, but the edges have been modeled and look a lot nicer and cleaner than just if I were to leave it alone and not do anything to it. Okay, so if you want to leave exposed coils as part of your design, great. But if you're going to do that, I want you to model the edges so that it looks nice and neat rather than sloppy. First thing people see in any artwork is whether it's sloppy or not. You know, you could have the best coil pot design and form, but if you leave the surface of it sloppy, that is the first thing people will look at and they'll be like, it's sloppy, I don't want to spend any more time looking at it. So make sure that even if you're going to leave these coils exposed, that they've been nice and dealt with and all the edges of them have been modeled and rounded and nicely thought of. Okay, so I'm going to do a time-lapse video now of smoothing out all my edges up to about here and modeling out these coils so that they stand out and they look nice and they have a nice definition to them. Okay, so end of the demonstration, either smoothing or modeling your coils. Make sure that by the end your rim is nice, the base is nice, and every part of your coil pot has been dealt with.